Greetings Guitaralians, Jeff Weinberger coming at you here with a new guitar tutorial. Today I'd like to talk about an interval called the tritone. And the tritone is basically the space from one note to another measured by 3 whole steps. And so if you have 3 whole steps between 2 notes, that interval is known as a tritone. 3, tri. And there's a lot of myths about this interval. I think a lot of people have claimed that it's called the devil's interval, and back in the Middle Ages the church had banned it and all of that, and that's mostly untrue. There's a lot of music history books and a lot of writings that we can study from those times, but nobody called it the devil's interval, and it wasn't banned. But that's a cool story anyway. And then later on, metal groups like Slayer and Marilyn Manson and Black Sabbath and people like that used it, because it does have kind of a diabolical sound to it when you use it in that way. But it's also used in jazz, it's used in country music, it's used in blues. It's a great interval, so let's get into it. There I was just doing a little improvised picking thing in A, just doing kind of a 12-bar blues in A. That's a really good use of it. We'll look at how Jimmy Page did that in the Zeppelin tune Rock and Roll, which is one of my favorite examples of all time of great use of the tritone on the guitar. So if in the key of A we look at it, A is the root, of course. A is the first note of the scale and what the first chord of the scale is built on, the A chord or the A7 chord. And then 3 whole steps away from that is going to be the note E flat. That has a real kind of evil vibe to it. That, matter of fact, I think in Europe they tune their ambulances and emergency vehicles to that interval to really get your attention. So the tritone, it can be up high too, and then it can be not only from A to E flat, but it can be E flat to A. So the A can be below the E flat or above the E flat. It still has that kind of evil sound to it. So just quick list of some songs. I'll leave a full list down below in the links down below, so you can link to some videos and listen to these songs. But just the quick list that I have here, like the very short list, is going to be Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. That stuff right there that Jimmy Page did, those little chords, tritones. Everyone knows Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. That was a pretty famous tune that used that interval. That opening intro, it wasn't played on the guitar like that. He actually, I think, just played octaves, like, I think it was the bass that did the other note. And if I'm not mistaken, they combine their bass and guitar together to make that tritone. But still, it's a great example. Station to Station by David Bowie, that's one of my favorite examples. And the piano that goes for a really long time in Station to Station is playing a tritone. So it's a great interval. Just real quick, The Simpsons, you know that theme song to The Simpsons that Danny Elfman wrote? Tritone right there. Danse Macabre, that's a classical piece of music by the French composer Saint-Saëns, Camille Saint-Saëns, and that is based around a tritone. On and on. We could sit here forever talking about songs that use the tritone, because it's a very useful interval, but I'll leave that list down below so you can access those all by yourself. Alright, so we established that it is not the devil's interval. It can sound evil, but it can also sound real sweet, especially in blues and stuff like that. So every 7th chord, every dominant 7th chord, like an A7, a D7, an E7, those all contain a tritone. And the interval happens to be the note between the 3rd of the chord and the flatted 7th of the chord. Those are 2 of the most important notes of a 7th chord to make it sound like a dominant 7th chord. So if that sounds like a foreign language to you or scientific speak, let's break that down into something you can understand. So you've got your scale. You've got, say, this scale. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A. It's known as the A Mixolydian mode or scale. And that's the one that we get our A7 chord from. When you play an A7 chord like a cowboy chord, that's way down here. It still has that interval in it. It still has the same notes. It's just a different arrangement of those notes. But what I was doing was the A7 way up here, which is a great rhythm chord for you to know. So the third of the chord of an A7 chord is the note C sharp. 1, 2, 3, C sharp. That's one of the notes. And then the seventh of that chord is G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You take the 3, you take the 7, you put them together, or you could do the 7 and the 3, whichever order you want, and you get this. A little two-note chord known as a tritone. It's a great little interval. Throw an A note below that as a bass note. That's basically what I was doing in that intro, that little improvised Chet Atkinsy thing that I was doing. That was using that. I threw in a couple open strings too, though. I had my open B and my open E in there too to give it more of a ring. A guy that really took advantage of that and used that kind of chord a lot was Merle Travis. He did tons of that in his playing. And of course, Chet Atkins picked up on that and all the fingerstyle players after them. But that little tritone by itself says a lot. Add a bass note to it, and it says A7. Add other stuff to it, and it says really cool chord. A great A9 voicing in this case. So just by playing the third and the seventh of the chord, you get the flavor of the chord. Now that might elude you right now as to how am I going to use that? Why is he talking on and on about this music theory stuff and mixolydian modes and tritones and devil's intervals, and what does that mean to me? How am I going to use that? I'm sitting here at home thinking, what can I do to practice this and make this work?